Paul Volcker coming out today with his comment on the proposed Volcker Rule, named after him, to limit proprietary trading by Wall Street banks. They used to be called investment banks, but I don't think they're called investment banks anymore. To discuss that, Dan Ryan, chairman of PricewaterhouseCoopers Financial Advisory Practice. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Evan. Welcome.
Now, I'm going to try and put the Volcker Rule into context for our viewers first, okay? I'm going to say there are two schools of thought on Wall Street right now. One school of thought, I'll call it the Lloyd Blankfein Goldman Sachs school of thought, is, you know what? Wall Street is in, let's call it a tough part of the cycle. We'll have a bull market someday. We'll come up out of the cycle, and all this carrying on about whether or not Wall Street has a future will go away. The second school of thought, let's call it the James Gorman school of thought, would argue big structural secular change underway on Wall Street because of the Volcker Rule. Proprietary trading you can forget about. Wall Street will never be the same. Which school of thought do you adhere to?
Well, I think the soundbite has got to be the Gorman soundbite.
Right.
But I think they're both saying the same thing.
You think so?
In a different way, yeah, in terms of where things will come out. I mean, there's going to be a structural change in the marketplace. I think the banks will react to that. They're creatures that have proven their ability to do that. And I both think at the end of the day, survivors.
Now, I read Paul Volcker's comments today. Right. I don't know if you had an opportunity to read them. They just came out earlier today. And he basically argues, you know what? Wall Street is going bananas about this rule, but it really does make sense. It's not a competitive disadvantage. They can do enough trading that they need to do to be real market makers in the fullest sense of the word. And there are all those other crazy nuts out there like the hedge funds that'll do the proprietary trading. So why in the world do the Wall Street banks need to be doing that? It sounded pretty persuasive, but the Wall Street banks are not going to go down without a fight, are they?
No, they're not. And to tell you the truth, it sounds persuasive if it's only targeted at, say, 6 banks, which is really what he highlights in his letter. The reality is everyone from the Black Economic Council to MetLife, to many individuals and big institutions and governments are commenting on this.
Right.
So it doesn't just impact these couple of people.
And they're unhappy, like large institutional investors, Fidelity, other large fixed income investors. They're saying that please don't put any handcuffs on the investment banks because that will raise, in effect, our costs at the end of the day and impede market liquidity. Do you believe that that's true?
Absolutely, 100%.
Right. Why do you believe that limiting the investment banks to a narrowly defined market-making rule would create illiquidity in the market?
Well, number one, market making is just a subset of proprietary trading.
Right.
So when you eliminate proprietary trading, you in effect eliminate market making unless you can pull it out. So then you've got to define it. The way the regulators have defined it right now, it clearly would limit liquidity.
Right.
It's like saying in New York City, if suddenly taxis couldn't pick up individuals, you had to call them up on the phone and pre-book it in advance.
Right.
Okay, you're telling me if that happened, that wouldn't impact people's ability to get to work?
Right. Do you think liquidity is overrated? And by that I mean the following. All the black box, a lot of the black box HFT, high frequency trading firms claim, they are critical to market liquidity. The investment banks claim they are critical to liquidity. And yet when the going gets rough, they disappear. It reminds me, in fact, if you go back to the crash of 1987, then there was more formal market making on the floor of the stock exchange, and all the so-called market makers, when things got rough, they all disappeared. Do you think liquidity is overrated given what happened over the last few years?
Well, it's clearly not certain, but I don't think overrated. I think in terms of talking to the buy side, the institutional investors, they would say that there's deeper liquidity in the fixed income markets, which are supported by dealers, than actually the equity markets, which are supported by exchanges.
Right.
So I think that tells
Right, but is the how would I put it? Is the deeper liquidity that we see today, is that largely a mirage? And by that I mean all the the large banks are basically getting very cheap money from the Fed. I mean, the Fed at the end of the day is the one providing the liquidity in effect, and not the banks themselves. Is that being unfair?
Well, the Fed's providing confidence and a backstop, not really the liquidity.
Right. Okay, let's make some predictions. I
Sure.
know you don't love making predictions. You're in the prediction business.
No.
How long do you think it'll take before something that's called the Volcker Rule gets passed? Given the amount of commentary, lobbying, fighting that we're going to see over the next few months and years.
Yeah, my guess is the regulators have said they want to get it right. So getting it right means listening to all these comments, which right now are several hundred, as you pointed out. Addressing them in the rule, and ultimately probably reproposing another draft. Volcker even says in his letter, this is the first draft, right? So my guess is we're going to be in this for quite a while, arguing over what you and I are talking about today.
And at the end of the day, do the investment banks get what they want, or do you think they're going to be unhappy?
I can't predict that side.
Dan Ryan, thank you very much.